By 1765, the American colonies were thriving. Across a vast, rugged landscape, a new generation of colonists had grown used to hard work and self-reliance. For decades, they had managed their own local affairs, far removed from the daily oversight of the British Crown. Then, Parliament began sending bills to cover the enormous debts left over from the French and Indian War. They imposed direct taxes on paper, glass, and tea without colonial consent. To the colonists, these levies were an aggressive attempt by London to seize control over a people who had successfully governed themselves for generations. Resistance formed almost immediately. In cities like Boston, groups like the Sons of Liberty began meeting in secret. They flooded the streets with pamphlets, rallying public outrage and channeling widespread frustration into a highly coordinated resistance movement against British rule. That mounting tension violently boiled over on March 5, 1770. During a confrontation in the streets of Boston, British troops opened fire on a crowd of unarmed civilians. 5 Americans were left dead in the snow. Colonial organizers quickly capitalized on the anger. Following the Boston Tea Party, where protesters dumped hundreds of chests of British tea into the harbor, London retaliated. They passed a series of punishing measures known as the Intolerable Acts, explicitly designed to break Boston's resistance and isolate Massachusetts. But London miscalculated. Instead of fracturing the colonial movement, the severity of the punishment forced leaders from entirely different regions to convene in Philadelphia. At the First Continental Congress, men who had never previously met shook hands, forging an alliance across the 13 colonies to present a unified front. The breaking point arrived on the morning of April 19, 1775, on Lexington Green. A small group of 77 colonial Minutemen stood in the mist, facing down the overwhelming, disciplined ranks of the British military. During the standoff, an unknown person pulled a trigger. In the ensuing chaos of that single shot, the British ranks fired, leaving 8 Americans dead in the grass. The time for petitions and secret meetings had passed. A scattered population of farmers and tradesmen was now locked into an armed conflict with an empire. The Continental Congress needed someone to lead this newly declared war. They chose George Washington, a Virginia planter who took command of a fractured, untrained, and poorly supplied militia to fight the most elite professional military on the planet. The first year of fighting was disastrous. Throughout 1776, Washington's forces suffered catastrophic setbacks. The crushing loss of New York decimated the American ranks, leaving the Continental armies starving and on the edge of total collapse. To save his dying army, Washington took a massive tactical risk. On Christmas night, in the middle of a brutal blizzard, he led his remaining troops across the freezing, ice-choked waters of the Delaware River to launch a surprise attack at Trenton. While Washington fought through the winter snow, the intellectual framework of the cause had been forged months earlier during a suffocating summer in Philadelphia. A 33-year-old Thomas Jefferson drafted a bold new vision, anchored by the claim that all men are created equal. These words carried immediate physical danger. For the 56 men who signed it, this document was a literal death sentence. If their rebellion failed, the Crown would execute them for treason. The victory at Trenton transformed a dying army into one that believed in its cause. Backed by a document that pledged the lives and sacred honor of its signers, the rebellion now possessed both a commander who refused to break and a specific ideological purpose: the creation of a republic built on human equality. The next year brought a massive strategic breakthrough. In October 1777, colonial forces managed to trap and capture an entire British army of nearly 6,000 men at Saratoga, New York. Across the Atlantic, Benjamin Franklin used this precise victory as diplomatic leverage. Working the halls of Paris, he convinced France to formally enter the conflict, soon followed by Spain and the Netherlands. The rebellion escalated into a global war. The British Empire was suddenly forced to scatter its navy and troops to defend territories across multiple oceans, severely weakening their grip on the American colonies. This global alliance set up the decisive trap of the war. In 1781, Washington and Rochambeau marched troops south to pin Lord Cornwallis against the Virginia coast at Yorktown. A massive French fleet arrived in the Chesapeake Bay, destroying the British naval forces and severing his only escape route. Pinned by American troops, French infantry, and a foreign navy, the British forces endured 3 weeks of merciless bombardment. By drawing in global allies and executing a joint maneuver, the outgunned colonists forced the surrender of the greatest empire on Earth. But winning the war almost broke the country. Without a common enemy, the 13 independent states quickly turned on each other. They were drowning in war debt, plagued by internal fighting, and operating under a national government that was unable to enforce its own laws. To prevent total collapse, leaders gathered in strict secrecy behind the closed doors of Independence Hall in Philadelphia during the sweltering summer of 1787. Inside, the delegates fiercely debated how to construct a functioning system of federalism, balancing a strong national authority with the independence of individual states. They argued bitterly over how representation would be counted and clashed over the institution of slavery. Out of these brutal, imperfect compromises, the convention produced a framework built on a system of checks and balances and a Bill of Rights to protect individual liberties. The final victory in Philadelphia established a sovereign republic. They replaced monarchical rule with a government rooted in individual liberty and a system of laws designed to outlast its creators. When George Washington stepped forward to be inaugurated as the first leader of this government, he took the helm of a nation that had no guarantee it would survive its first decade. The entire endeavor was deeply improbable. A loose coalition of farmers, lawyers, and dreamers had willingly risked the gallows to dismantle a monarchy and build a system of self-governance the world had never seen. 2.5 centuries later, this hard-won republic remains. It is a living monument, passed down directly to you,